What's up guys, and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, my name is Dave and I'm a photographer and videographer from the Bay Area of California. So I bought this Leica M11 222 days ago today. Today I'm going to share with you 5 things that stand out to me about this camera and why I think it's the most fantastic Leica I've ever owned. But I also have a few things that I think are pretty critical of this camera, and I've got to be honest and tell you those things as well. This camera had a ton of criticism when it first came out because people were experiencing this camera lock up and freeze on them basically all the time. In fact, it really scared me from buying a Leica M11 when it was launched, which is why I just held out with the M10R. But that said, at this point in the game, the firmware on the M11 is very solid. In fact, it was solid when I bought this camera. I have only experienced, I believe, 2 times where the camera locked up. And when that happens, you have to flip the camera over, pop that battery out, pop it back in. It's not the most elegant thing to do, especially when you're on a shoot. I never have to do it. So if you're holding out and you're worried about the M11 having firmware issues or being a camera that locks up and freezes all the time, I'm happy to report that that is a non-issue for me, at least with this camera here. And I'm doubtful it would be an issue for you as well. The second thing about this camera that I just have been so thankful for is the incredible battery life this camera has. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this camera has incredible battery life. I've mentioned this a couple of times on this channel before, but back when I was rocking the M10R and the M10 before that, I actually had 4 batteries for that camera because it just would not get me through a full day, and I needed an entire lineup of batteries to make sure I was safe for the day. I was at the Venice Beach skate park. You may have seen the video I just put out last week. Shooting there for about 2 hours, shooting on a high-speed shutter. I took almost 2,000 photos just there alone. You're just firing off these rapid shots, and it was like 1,700 photos. I don't quite remember, but it was a lot. I started that day with a full battery. I ended that day with a half full battery, which that is insane to me. I have never had a camera with a battery as good as the battery in this. Now I will just add, I do not use the back screen hardly ever unless I'm using my close focus lens, which at a skate park did not use that once. Battery's amazing. Probably the most important feature for me on the M11. The third thing, and again, if you've watched my videos before, you'll know this isn't new. The M11's meter is what you would expect in 2024. Historically, the M cameras, even though they were digital, still had a more traditional meter style. This camera has multi-metering just like you would expect in any other modern mirrorless camera. I trust this camera to give me the right exposure, even in high contrast situations. Most of the time, it's getting the exposure right, and when it doesn't, it's typically underexposing, and I can correct that in post. But I really trust the meter, which takes a lot of guesswork or trying to anticipate the situation. The process I used to go through mentally for my M10 and my M10R, I don't have to go through that with the M11. I just trust the meter. It does a fantastic job. So that's another great point. Next up, let's talk about the file size. Now I know this camera has that triple resolution ability. I think I have downsized maybe twice. Otherwise, I just keep it on 61 megapixels. You know, if you came up as a millennial, you can remember the days of very limited data. Like when I was in college, and I'm dating myself here, I was in college in the early 2000s. I had a thumb drive that had like 32 gigabytes, and that was like huge at one time. And then you might remember the iPods when they came out and you were buying storage options, the best you could get, and even like the early phones. Well, look, here's the thing. Today, data is cheap. File size isn't really that big of a deal as it would have been, 20 years ago. If you were trying to shoot 61 megapixels and save those files, I think you were gonna run into some issues. I've got like 50 terabytes just in this room alone in data, and I haven't spent a ton to get that. So I don't really worry about the file size, but let me tell you the benefits of the file size. If you're shooting 61 megapixels, you have so much range to crop that you can shoot wider and then choose to punch in a little later. Now, I know purists don't like that approach. A purist would rather get the composition exactly how they want it in the body, and I understand that mentality too. But coming from a background of doing a lot of commercial work and clients wanting something different after you've already shot, it's so nice to be able to crop and punch in. My brain is just wired that way. So I love the 61 megapixels. I love how clean and dynamic the files are out of this camera. It really is incredible. And having 61 megapixels in a rangefinder is amazing. Absolutely love it. The fifth thing I'll just say about this camera as I land the plane on my favorite things is, from a experience standpoint, this is about, in my opinion, like perfected. The Leica experience, even back to the film cameras, have always been very refined. I was hesitant about the experience of this camera. For instance, not having the bottom plate and having that battery just click in and click out, having the SD card just right alongside the battery right there. Like, I was hesitant about that experience, but I'll be honest with you, I just absolutely love it. It's so simple. The simplicity of it is awesome. It's minimal, it feels really good, and I just love it. The finishes, I mean, it's Leica, these people care about details. And so the experience of using the camera, of holding the camera, the shutter, the finishes, it's really perfection. Hey, before we get into talking about the things that I don't love, let me just take a minute and share with you that coming up just in about 2 months is the Bay Area Photography Workshop. I will be hosting a workshop right here in the Bay between June 20th and 22nd. It's a 3-day workshop. So you come the day before though, and definitely need to stay the day after. This workshop has a few spots left. And so if you want to find out more about it, what we're gonna be doing and the details, like where you'll be staying and what the schedule is gonna be like, there is a link below. I have tried to make this workshop as affordable as possible, and you can find all of that info out right below. So come join us here in the Bay. We've got a few spots left. We've got people coming from all over the country for this, so you'll meet some new people, you'll get some awesome experiences, and I mean, it's the Bay Area, so even if we didn't do a workshop and you just came to explore, you're gonna absolutely love it. Find out that info, click the link right below. Okay, let's talk about some things that I don't love about the M11. I was talking about the files a minute ago, how much I love the 61 megapixels, but I'll be honest with you, the files are a little more magenta than I personally like. I'm basically always shifting things a little greener and away from the magenta side. And as I've used various Leica cameras, I have seen as the cameras have gotten more refined that the sensors have been shifting towards magenta. This is more magenta than the M10R, which was more magenta than the M10, which was more magenta than the M240. So there's definitely a shift towards magenta. I personally don't love that. I like more of a green undertone to my photos, but that's a personal preference. So these right out of the box, they're a little magenta, and I do correct them in post. The second thing is something I cannot replicate. It may be a feature, but if it is, I'm unclear about it, and maybe you know about this and you could tell me, but when I look at the viewfinder in here, which you may recall, I'm blind in my right eye, I use the left eye, so don't judge. But when I'm looking in here, I've seen the white lines on the border. I've seen them turn colors before, like the top line will go red, or the side will go red, or it'll be red like in the corner. I've seen it, and then it's gone, and then it comes back at these random times that I don't know where it's come from, or if it's a setting in here, or if there's something up. The lack of clarity that I have over this is really the issue, because I've never changed the settings. So I don't know where that came from or where it went, but it freaked me out when I first saw it, and I never want to see it again. my biggest criticism is that I feel like the processor in this camera is a little underpowered for what the camera can actually do. This is a common problem I have where I'll be out on a shoot, I'll go to snag that photo and then quickly want to check and take a look and I'll get a please wait that pops up. But if I go really fast, sometimes it gets stuck on a black screen. I've noticed that like it'll show me the file name and then it won't load because I went too fast. I asked the camera to do something while it was still processing what it had already done. Sometimes that causes it to give me like a 5-second delay before it gets back to being operational. And again, that just comes back to like the speed in which I'm shooting. Trying to make it do it right now. I'm definitely getting the please wait. Let me see if I can see it. Please wait. And there's the image. So all of that to say, the processor feels a little underpowered. If I was to compare this to like my Sony a7R5, when I fire the shutter and hit play, it's just there. So this feels a little slow for what the camera is capable of, but this is really only an issue when I'm trying to quickly review what I just did. Like at the skate park when I was trying to shoot wide open f1.4, get these action shots, these guys moving around. I wanted to see if I was in focus after a guy went flying through the air. So I quickly looked and I would end up bugging the camera out for a couple of seconds. But other than those things, the M11 really is like a 10 out of 10 camera for me. In almost every scenario, it has proven itself to be a great camera for the way I work and for what my expectations are when I go out and shoot. Now, as someone who's only used the camera for about 222 days, I recognize that there's still a lot I'm gonna learn about this camera over time, so I do look forward to doing like a long-term review further down the road. But as of right now, I feel like I'm in a good place with this camera, in a good rhythm. The things that make me happy, and I've learned to live with the things that I don't love, which is part of being a photographer because there is no perfect camera. I hope you guys found this video helpful and informative. If you have any questions about the M11, I am happy to answer them. Just drop a comment below. If you own an M11 and you've had some experiences that you love or things that you don't like, also share those below because I think the community benefits from this kind of dialogue. Thank you guys again for watching, and I'll see you next time.